Imagine you are crouched on a damp stone ledge above a courtyard in 14th century Florence. Your heart hammers against your ribs, not with thrill, but with the cold realization that your boots are slipping on mossy grout. Forget what you see in storybooks. Being a medieval assassin is not about graceful leaps or stylish hoods. It is about the stench of open sewers filling your lungs as you crawl through filth just to reach a servant entrance. It is about the bone-chilling weight of a rusted dagger tucked into your tunic, knowing that if it chips against a chainmail shirt, you are a dead man. There are no smoke bombs to save you. There is only the darkness, the paralyzing fear of the gallows, and the certainty that your life is worth less than the gold coin promised for this desperate, bloody work. You probably think you know what an assassin looks like. You have seen the tapestries of modern imagination and the silver screens of the future. You imagine a figure draped in midnight silk, leaping effortlessly from a stone battlement into a pile of soft hay. You see a silent professional with a specialized kit of poisoned needles and folding bows. You see a master of the blade who moves with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a surgeon. You imagine someone who exists outside the laws of gravity and the filth of common men. But as you stand here, in the damp, freezing reality of the 14th century, that image begins to dissolve like salt in a heavy rainstorm. The truth of your profession is far more pathetic, far more desperate, and significantly more dangerous than any story told in a tavern. Welcome to the reality of the medieval killer. Forget the idea of the master of shadows. In this world, the shadows are not your friends. They are cold, they are wet, and they are usually occupied by someone even more desperate than you. Your life is not a series of elegant maneuvers and high-stakes political intrigue. It is a grueling, miserable struggle to stay alive long enough to commit a crime that will likely result in your own horrific execution. Look down at yourself. You are not wearing a custom-tailored suit of reinforced leather. You are wearing a heavy wool tunic that has not been washed in 3 weeks. It is damp from the pervasive mist of the city, and it smells of wood smoke, old sweat, and the pungent aroma of the tanneries located 3 streets over. If you tried to wear a sleek, dark costume to blend in, you would stand out like a beacon. In a world of browns, grays, and muddy yellows, someone wearing pristine black silk is not a shadow. They are a target for every bored guard and suspicious merchant on the road. To be an effective killer, you have to look like everyone else. You have to look like a beggar, a common laborer, or a lowly servant. You have to look like someone who is not worth a second glance, which means you must embrace the grime and the invisibility of the poor. You decide to move through the city under the cover of night, thinking this will be your greatest advantage. This is your first mistake. A medieval city at night is not the playground of the agile. There are no street lamps. There are no glowing windows to guide your way. When the sun goes down, the world becomes a pitch-black labyrinth of hazards. The streets are not paved with smooth stones. They are rutted, uneven tracks of packed earth and filth. Every few steps, your foot sinks into a hole filled with stagnant water or something much worse. There is no sewer system here. The residents simply throw their waste out of the upper windows. If you are trying to be silent, the squelch of your boots in a pile of offal is a sound that will betray you to anyone with ears. And what about those rooftops you plan to run across? Forget about it. The architecture of this era is not designed for parkour. Most buildings are topped with thatch, which is essentially a thick layer of dried straw. It is slippery when wet, and it is prone to collapsing under the weight of a grown man. If you try to run across a roof, you are more likely to fall through the ceiling of a startled family than you are to reach your target. Even the stone buildings are treacherous. The mortar is often crumbling, and the handholds are slick with moss and lichen. There are no ornamental ledges positioned perfectly for a daring escape. There is only cold stone that will tear the skin from your fingers and a long drop to a hard death. Now, consider your tools. You probably want a sophisticated weapon, something hidden and clever. In reality, you have a dagger. It is made of iron or perhaps low-quality steel. It is not a surgical instrument. It is a heavy, pointed piece of metal that you have spent an hour sharpening on a whetstone behind a stable. It does not have a spring-loaded mechanism. It does not have a folding hilt. It is just a knife. If you are lucky, you might have a short sword, but carrying such a weapon openly marks you as a soldier or a man of violence. To get close to your target, you have to hide that blade beneath your cloak. This means every time you move, the cold metal rubs against your thigh, chafing your skin and reminding you that one wrong slip could result in you stabbing yourself before you even see your mark. You might think of poison as the elegant solution, the way to kill without getting your hands dirty. But you are not a chemist, and your local apothecary is more likely to give you something that causes a mild stomach ache than a silent death. Medieval poisons are notoriously unreliable. You might pay a small fortune for what you are told is essence of hemlock or crushed nightshade, only to find out that it was actually just bitter herbs or colored water. Or worse, the poison is so slow and painful that the victim has hours to cry out, name suspects, and call for the guards before they finally expire. There is no such thing as a clean kill with a vial. It is a messy, unpredictable gamble that often ends with the poisoner being caught because they stayed too long to see if the work was done. The target themselves is another problem entirely. In your mind, the noble you seek to kill is a lonely figure standing on a balcony, staring pensively at the moon. In reality, a medieval noble is almost never alone. Privacy is a modern invention that has no place in this century. A person of high status is surrounded by a swarm of people from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to sleep. There are valets to dress them, cooks to feed them, secretaries to read to them, and guards to stand at the door. Even in the middle of the night, there are often servants sleeping on the floor at the foot of their bed. To get to your target, you have to pass through a dozen layers of human observation. You are not just fighting one man. You are fighting an entire household of people who are paid to notice strangers. This brings us to the most difficult part of your job: the crowd. You might think a busy market square is the perfect place for a hit. You can strike quickly and melt away into the throng. But have you ever actually stood in a medieval market? It is a chaotic shoulder-to-shoulder mass of people who are all hyper-aware of their surroundings. People in this time are suspicious of everyone. They are constantly on the lookout for pickpockets, brawlers, and troublemakers. If you move too fast, you are noticed. If you move too slow, you are noticed. If you reach for something under your cloak, 3 people will see the movement. And if you do manage to strike, what happens next? There is no smoke bomb to cover your exit. There is no magical way to disappear. When a man falls in a crowded street with a knife in his ribs, the reaction is instantaneous. People scream. They grab the nearest person. They block the alleys. A medieval mob is a terrifying thing. They do not wait for a trial. If you are caught with blood on your hands, you will not be handed over to a polite constable. You will be beaten, trampled, and torn apart by 100 angry peasants who see you as a threat to the fragile peace of their day. You are not a master of the night. You are a desperate individual who has taken a job that most people would find suicidal. You are probably doing this because you are starving, or because someone has a hold over you, or because you were a soldier who found that the only thing you are good at is ending lives. The gold promised to you seems like a fortune, but you realize now that every copper of it is earned through sheer, unadulterated terror. Your heart is hammering against your ribs so hard it feels like it might break. Your hands are shaking with the cold and the adrenaline. You realize that the stories of the master assassins were written by people who have never had to hold a cold blade in a dark alley. Those stories were written for people who want to believe that death can be beautiful and organized. As you stand in the shadows of a leaning timber house, listening to the distant bark of a stray dog and the rhythmic snoring of a beggar nearby, you understand the truth. There is no glory here. There is no brotherhood. There is only the weight of the iron in your hand and the knowledge that if you fail, no one will ever know your name, and if you succeed, you will have to live the rest of your life looking over your shoulder for the man who is coming to do to you exactly what you are about to do to another. The myth of the master killer is a lie told to the comfortable. For you, it is just another long, cold night in the mud, waiting for a chance to ruin your soul for a handful of coins. You are sitting in the corner of a tavern that smells of wet wool and burnt grease, and you are realizing that the glamorous life of a shadow warrior is a lie told by poets who have never missed a meal. You look down at your hands. They are calloused, stained with the grime of the city, and shaking just a little bit from a mix of cold and hunger. You are waiting for a man who promised to meet you here an hour after the bells of the cathedral rang for vespers. He has not arrived. In your world, every minute of delay is a minute where the price of your soul drops a little lower. Let us talk about the math of murder. You see, the stories tell of legendary killers who receive chests of gold and the favor of kings. But you are not a legend. You are a desperate man in the 14th century, and the economics of your chosen profession are absolutely miserable. To understand why it sucked to be you, you first have to understand what a coin is actually worth and how little of it you are ever going to see. Imagine that you have been asked to remove a troublesome merchant or a rival cousin in a property dispute. Your employer, a minor noble with a thin silk cloak and a very loud voice, has offered you 5 gold florins. To a peasant earning a few pennies a week, 5 florins sounds like a king's ransom, sounds like a new life. But you have to look at the overhead costs before you start dreaming of a farm in the countryside. First, you need the tools of the trade. You cannot just walk into a blacksmith and ask for an assassin's kit. If you want a blade that will not shatter against a rib cage, you have to pay for quality steel. A decent dagger might cost you several silver groats, and a sword, if you even know how to use one, could cost a year's wages for a laborer. You probably cannot afford a sword, so you settle for a heavy utilitarian knife and maybe a stout club. Then there is the matter of your appearance. You cannot stalk a target while wearing the bright, undyed wool of a farmhand. You need dark clothes, but not the theatrical black leather you see in modern tales. Leather is expensive, loud, and hard to clean. You need heavy wool dyed in deep blues or dark greens, colors that blend into the shadows of a timber-framed alleyway. Dye costs money. Tailoring costs money. Next, you have to consider the cost of information. You cannot kill a man if you do not know where he sleeps, who guards his door, and what time he goes to the latrine. This means you have to spend days, maybe weeks, lurking in the shadows. You have to buy ale for talkative stable boys. You have to slip a few pennies to a maidservant to find out if the window latches are sturdy. Every day you spend watching your target is a day you are not earning money elsewhere. You are burning through your meager savings just to prepare for a job that might fall through. You are eating nothing but hard bread and pottage, sleeping in haylofts or under bridges to save your coins for bribes. By the time you are actually ready to strike, You might have already spent 2 of those 5 promised florins just on preparation. And here is the truly depressing part of the medieval gig economy. There is no such thing as a contract. There is no legal recourse if your employer decides not to pay you. You are a criminal. If you go to the town guard and complain that Lord so and so stiffed you on a murder fee, you will find yourself swinging from a gallows before the sun sets. The negotiation itself is a dance of desperation. Your client knows you are poor. They know you are likely a disgraced soldier or a man who has lost his land. They will lowball you because they can. They will tell you that the job is easy, that the target is a coward, and that the risk is minimal. They are lying. In the medieval world, everyone is a target and everyone is armed. Even a simple merchant likely carries a knife and knows how to use it. If he catches you in his bedchamber, he is legally allowed to kill you where you stand. There is no trial for a housebreaker caught in the act. And let us say you succeed. You find the moment. You do the deed. You slip away into the night, your heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You have blood on your sleeves and a hollow feeling in your stomach. Now comes the most dangerous part of the business. Getting paid. You meet your employer in a dark place, much like the tavern you are sitting in now. You expect your 3 remaining florins, but your employer is looking at you differently now. Before, you were a tool, a necessary evil. Now you are a witness. You are the only person who can link them to a capital crime. In their mind, paying you is not just an expense. It is a liability. Why give you 3 gold coins when they can give you 3 inches of steel between the ribs and solve 2 problems at once? This is the reality of the medieval breadline. You are constantly balanced on the edge of betrayal. If you are too good at your job, you are too dangerous to keep alive. If you are too bad at it, you are caught and tortured until you give up the name of the man who hired you. There is no winning move. Furthermore, consider the physical toll of this life. You are not living in a clean, heated apartment. You are living in the damp, the cold, and the filth. Most medieval assassins were not high-class professionals. They were people who were one bad harvest away from starving to death. You are likely suffering from chronic pain, bad teeth, and the lingering effects of old injuries. Every time you jump from a wall or crouch in a cold cellar for 6 hours, your joints scream in protest. You do not have access to medicine or healers. If you get a small cut during a struggle and it festers, you might lose an arm or your life to an infection before you even get a chance to spend your blood money. The competition is also fierce. You are not the only desperate soul in the city. There are hundreds of ex-soldiers returning from the wars in France or the Crusades in the East. These men are trained in violence and have even less to lose than you do. They will take a job for a flagon of wine and a warm bed for the night. How can you compete with that? You try to maintain a reputation for discretion and skill, but in a world without business cards or resumes, your reputation is only as good as the last person you didn't kill. You look at the coins you have left on the table. They are thin, clipped at the edges by someone trying to steal a bit of silver. That is your life in a nutshell. You are being clipped at every turn. The landlord takes his cut, the informant takes his cut, and the church tells you that you are going to burn for eternity for even thinking about the work you do. And what happens if you actually get the money? You cannot just walk into the market and start spending gold florins without raising eyebrows. If a man who looks like he lives in a gutter suddenly has enough gold to buy a horse, the authorities are going to have questions. You have to launder your wealth in the most basic sense. You have to spend it slowly, a few pennies at a time, on better food and slightly cleaner clothes. You are a rich man who must continue to live like a beggar just to stay under the radar. The economics of murder are a trap. You kill for money because you are poor, but the act of killing makes it impossible for you to ever truly escape poverty. You are shackled to the underworld. You are a ghost in your own city, a man who exists only in the margins of the ledger. You watch the wealthy merchants pass by in their furs, and you realize that their wealth is built on the same violence you provide. But they have the luxury of paying someone like you to keep their hands clean. They get the profit and you get the mud. You hear the tavern door creak open. A cold draft of winter air rushes in, flickering the few candles that remain lit. You sit up straighter, your hand instinctively drifting toward the hidden knife at your belt. Is this your employer finally arriving with your pay? Or is it a group of men hired to ensure you never talk? In this business, the difference between a payday and a death sentence is often just a matter of who strikes first. You realize now that the handful of coins you are chasing will never be enough. It will never buy back the sleep you have lost or the peace of mind you traded away. You are a part of the breadline, a worker in the most dangerous and least protected industry in the world. You are a medieval assassin, and you are beginning to understand that the true cost of a life is far higher than anyone is willing to pay you. The gold is a fantasy. The reality is the cold, the hunger, and the constant, gnawing fear that your next job will be your last. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded too well. Imagine for a moment that your target is not across the street or even in the next town. He is 400 miles away, tucked behind the thick stone walls of a lakeside fortress. In the movies, you would simply fade into a montage. A few artistic shots of a horse galloping across a sunset ridge, a quick dissolve, and suddenly you are there, refreshed and ready to strike. But the reality of the Middle Ages is far less cinematic. For you, the assassin, the road is not a transition. It is the enemy. It is a grueling, soul-crushing marathon of filth and physical degradation that will strip the strength from your limbs before you ever lay eyes on your mark. You start your journey at dawn, and the first thing you notice is the mud. In the medieval world, a road is rarely more than a cleared path of dirt, and after the spring rains, it transforms into a viscous, grasping sludge. With every step you take, the earth tries to steal your boots. You hear that wet, rhythmic sucking sound as you heave your foot out of the mire over and over for 10 hours a day. By noon, your calves are burning. By dusk, your hamstrings feel like they are made of frayed rope. You are not a shadow moving through the night. You are a wet, shivering man struggling not to trip over a hidden root and break your ankle in the middle of nowhere. You cannot afford a fine, spirited warhorse. Such a beast would draw far too much attention and cost more than your life is worth. If you have a horse at all, it is a sturdy, plodding garron or a mule, an animal built for endurance rather than speed. You spend hours in a wooden saddle that has seen better decades, feeling the vibration of every hoofbeat rattle up through your spine. Your inner thighs are raw and bleeding from the constant friction of wet wool against coarse leather. Every time you dismount, you have to wait for your legs to stop shaking before you can even think about walking. Then there is the weight. You are not just carrying yourself. You have a pack filled with the bare essentials for survival. You have a bedroll that is never truly dry, a small pot for cooking, a tinderbox that you pray has stayed damp-free, and enough hard, salted meat to keep you from starving. And then, there are the tools of your trade. You have a heavy steel blade strapped to your hip, and perhaps a smaller, more concealable dagger tucked into your boot. You might be carrying a crossbow, which is a bulky, awkward nightmare to transport on foot. Every ounce of that steel pulls at your shoulders, digging into your muscles until your neck is a knot of tension. You have to keep this weaponry hidden, too. You cannot walk through a village looking like a mercenary on a mission. You have to wrap your blades in oilcloth and hide them deep within your pack or under a heavy cloak, adding to the bulk and the heat. Speaking of the cloak, let us talk about the smell. You have been on the road for 2 weeks. You have not bathed. You have slept in your clothes every single night to stay warm. The wool of your tunic has absorbed the salt of your sweat, the musk of the horse, the smoke of a dozen campfires, and the unmistakable stench of stagnant bog water. You are a walking affront to the senses. If you were to walk into a noble court today, they would smell your approach long before they saw your face. This is the paradox of your profession. You are supposed to be invisible, yet your very physical state makes you stand out to anyone with a nose. You spend your evenings by the side of the path, picking lice out of your seams by the dim light of a dying fire, wondering if the itch in your scalp is going to drive you mad before the target does. Food is another battle entirely. There are no roadside inns with hot meals waiting every 10 miles. You eat what you can carry. Your diet consists of hardtack, which is a biscuit so dry and dense it could double as a whetstone. You soak it in watered-down, sour wine or a bit of thin ale just so you can chew it without breaking a tooth. Maybe you have some dried peas or a hunk of salt pork that is more gristle than meat. Your stomach is in a constant state of low-level revolt. The water you find in the streams might look clear, but it often carries the invisible taint of livestock upstream. You live with the constant threat of dysentery. Imagine trying to sneak into a heavily guarded castle while your intestines are screaming in agony. It is hard to be a silent predator when you are doubled over with cramps every 20 minutes. The nights are the worst. Unless you have the coin to stay at a crowded, filthy wayside inn, you are sleeping on the ground. You find a patch of earth that looks slightly less damp than the rest, spread your cloak, and try to rest. But the forest is never truly quiet. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth, sends a jolt of adrenaline through your heart. Are those wolves? Is it a band of outlaws looking for an easy mark? Or is it the local Lord Scouts, suspicious of a lone traveler in the woods? You sleep with one hand on the hilt of your knife, waking a dozen times before dawn. You never truly reach deep sleep. You exist in a state of permanent, crushing exhaustion. When you finally do reach an inn, it is not a sanctuary. You pay for a spot on a floor covered in old, rotting straw that hides a universe of fleas and biting mites. You share that floor with 10 other men, all of them snoring, smelling, and potentially looking to slit your throat for the boots on your feet. You cannot leave your pack unguarded for a second. You have to sleep with your head on your bag, the hard lumps of your equipment digging into your skull. You listen to the conversations around you, hoping no one asks where you are going or why a simple traveler has such calloused hands and a guarded gaze. You have to invent a story, a lie about a dying relative or a search for work, and you have to tell it with a straight face while your heart hammers against your ribs. And let us not forget the geography itself. You do not have a map. At best, you have a series of vague directions given to you by a contact in a smoky tavern. Follow the river until the stone bridge, then turn toward the rising sun until you see the burnt oak. If you miss a landmark because of a thick fog or a heavy downpour, you could wander for days in the wrong direction, wasting precious time and calories. The wilderness is vast and indifferent to your mission. In the deep forests, the canopy is so thick that the sun barely reaches the floor, leaving you in a perpetual, disorienting twilight. You are alone in a world that feels much larger than it actually is, and the isolation starts to gnaw at your mind. By the time you actually reach the town or the castle where your target resides, you are a shell of a human being. Your eyes are bloodshot and sunken. Your skin is sallow from poor nutrition and lack of sunlight. Your hands, which need to be steady for the kill, are shaking from fatigue. Your boots are falling apart, held together by strips of leather and hope. You look less like a deadly assassin and more like a common beggar. In a way, this is your best disguise, but it comes at a terrible price. You have to spend days just recovering your strength, huddling in a dark corner of a tavern, eating real bread and trying to massage the cramps out of your muscles. You are not the master of your environment. You are its victim. The logistics of the long road have taken your edge. While the target sits in his hall, warm, well-fed, and surrounded by friends, you are shivering in the shadows, trying to remember why you ever took this job in the first place. The physical toll of just getting to the location is often more dangerous than the act of the assassination itself. You have survived the mud, the hunger, the cold, and the predatory roads, but you have arrived at the finish line exhausted and broken. And now, after all that misery, the real work is supposed to begin. You have to climb a wall, bypass a guard, and deliver a killing blow with a hand that has spent the last 3 weeks just trying to hold onto a walking stick. This is the reality of the trade. It is not a dance of shadows. It is a slow, muddy crawl through a world that wants to swallow you whole. You have seen the stories and you have heard the legends. You probably imagine the medieval assassin as a shadow draped in silk, carrying a blade of legendary sharpness and vials of liquid death that can stop a heart in a single heartbeat. You might think of the tools of the trade as elegant, precise, and foolproof. But as you stand in the damp, freezing workshop of a back-alley blacksmith, the reality of 14th century technology begins to sink in. There is nothing elegant about the hunk of iron you are holding. There is nothing precise about the bag of dried weeds tucked into your belt. In this era, the technology of death is not a science. It is a messy, unreliable, and frustratingly crude gamble. Take a long look at your primary tool. It is a dagger, perhaps a slender misericord designed to slip between the joints of armor. In your mind, it is a surgical instrument. In reality, it is a piece of poorly tempered iron that has been hammered out over a charcoal fire. The metallurgy of the Middle Ages is a game of chance. If the smith overheated the metal, your blade is brittle. It looks fine now, but the moment you thrust it against a thick leather doublet or a hidden piece of chainmail, it will shatter like glass. If he underheated it, the metal is soft. Instead of piercing your target, the tip will simply curl and fold, leaving you standing there with a useless piece of bent wire while your target screams for his guards. You do not have the luxury of stainless steel or high-carbon alloys. Your blade is prone to rust if you breathe on it too hard. You spend hours in the dark, rubbing it with animal fat just to keep the orange rot from eating the edge. And that edge is never quite as sharp as you need it to be. You spend half your life hunched over a whetstone, spitting on the rock and grinding away, but the iron is grainy and stubborn. When the moment comes to use it, you will find that human skin is surprisingly tough. You will have to use every ounce of your body weight to force that blunt piece of metal through layers of wool, linen, and flesh. It is not a silent snip of a thread. It is a violent, grinding struggle. And what about the long-range option? You might think a crossbow is the answer to your prayers. It is a mechanical marvel of the age, certainly. But have you ever actually carried one through a city at night? It is heavy, awkward, and incredibly loud. To cock a powerful crossbow, you cannot just pull a trigger. You have to put your foot into a metal stirrup at the front, hook a heavy iron crank or a pulley system to the string, and grind away at a winch. The sound of those gears turning is like a drum roll in the silence of the night. It goes clack, 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 echoing off the stone walls and telling every guard within 3 blocks that someone is preparing to fire. If the weather turns, your expensive weapon becomes a wooden club. The string is made of twisted sinew or hemp. If it gets damp in the evening fog, it stretches. Suddenly, the bolt that was supposed to fly true and kill the Duke on his balcony instead wobbles through the air and thuds harmlessly into a wooden door frame. You get 1 shot, just 1. The time it takes to reload a crossbow in a high-pressure situation feels like an eternity. If you miss, you are not an assassin anymore. You are just a man standing in the street holding a heavy piece of wood while men with swords run toward you. Then there are the poisons. This is where the legends are the most deceptive. You have been told tales of odorless, tasteless drops that cause instant sleep or immediate demise. But as you look at the ingredients available to you, you realize that the world of medieval chemistry is a nightmare of bitter tastes and unpredictable results. You are working with belladonna, hemlock, and arsenic. These are not refined chemicals. They are ground-up roots and minerals mixed with honey or wine to hide the fact that they taste like literal poison. If you want to poison a lord's wine, you have to use a massive amount of the substance because the purity is so low. But the more you use, the more it smells like a swamp and tastes like burnt metal. You are constantly worried that your target will take 1 sip, spit it out across the table, and start shouting for the taster. Even if he does drink it, the effects are anything but clean. You are not looking at a peaceful passing. You are looking at hours or even days of violent vomiting, convulsions, and screaming. This is a problem for you. If your target takes 3 days to die, he has 3 days to talk to his confessors, his guards, and his heirs. He has 3 days to point a finger at the suspicious servant or the strange guest who arrived just before dinner. There is also the very real danger that you will poison yourself. You have to handle these herbs with bare hands in an age before rubber gloves. You are grinding toxic roots in a small room with no ventilation. You inhale the dust. You get the sap on your fingers and then you accidentally touch your eye or eat a piece of bread. Many would-be assassins ended up dead in their own kitchens long before they ever got close to their target, their hearts failing because they got a little bit too much monkshood under their fingernails. And let us talk about the defense. You are fighting against a world that is built to resist you. People in the Middle Ages were not walking around in t-shirts. A wealthy man wears a gambeson, which is essentially a coat made of 30 layers of linen quilted together. It is thick, it is heavy, and it is designed to stop a sword blow. Trying to stab through a gambeson with your brittle iron dagger is like trying to drive a nail through a thick mattress. It absorbs the energy, catches the point. You have to find the tiny gaps, the armpits, the throat, or the eyes. But your target is moving. He is breathing. He is surrounded by people. The mechanical failure of your tools combined with the physical resilience of medieval clothing means that your success rate is depressingly low. Even the simple act of staying hidden is betrayed by the technology of the time. You do not have rubber-soled boots. You have leather shoes with hard soles that click on stone or slip on wet mud. You do not have flashlights. You have torches or oil lamps that flicker, smoke, and smell like burning fat. If you try to move in total darkness, you will trip over a loose cobblestone or a sleeping pig and make enough noise to wake the dead. If you carry a light, you are a beacon for every watchman on the wall. You are trapped in a world where everything you use is prone to breaking, rotting, or failing at the worst possible moment. Your rope is made of hemp that frays and snaps if it gets too dry. Your lockpicks are iron wires that snap off inside the keyhole, locking you out and leaving behind evidence of your presence. There is no backup. There is no repair kit. When your technology fails, you are left with nothing but your bare hands and your desperate wits. You realize quickly that being an assassin in this world is not about being a master of gadgets. It is about managing a series of inevitable failures. You have to carry 3 daggers because you expect 2 of them to break. You have to use twice the lethal dose of hemlock because you expect half of it to be weak. You have to plan your escape route based on the fact that your crossbow will likely misfire. It is a life of constant, grinding maintenance and the nagging fear that the simple physics of the 14th century are working against you. Every time you prepare for a hit, you feel the weight of these failures. You look at the dull sheen of your blade and wonder if this is the time it snaps. You smell the bitter, earthy stench of the poison in your pocket and wonder if it will even work, or if it will just give the Count a bad stomach ache while you are being dragged to the gallows. The tools of your trade are not your friends. They are temperamental, crude, and dangerous. You are walking a tightrope, and the rope itself is rotting in your hands. This is the reality of the medieval operative. You are not a high-tech warrior. You are a man struggling against the limitations of a world that has not yet learned how to make a reliable piece of steel. As you tuck your brittle knife back into its sheath and prepare to step out into the rain, you know that your greatest enemy tonight might not be the guards or the high walls, but the very tools you are holding in your shaking hands. You stand at the edge of the tree line, and the first thing that hits you is the sheer, overwhelming scale of the obstacle before you. In the stories told by firelight in the city taverns, a castle is just a building. It is a house for a lord, a fancy pile of rocks with a flag on top. But as you look across the cleared killing field of the outer ward, you realize that a medieval fortress is not a building at all. It is a predator. It is a massive, silent machine designed for the sole purpose of making sure that you, specifically, stay exactly where you are. You look up at the curtain wall of the fortress. In your mind, you had pictured something you could scale with a bit of rope and a steady hand. Instead, you see 40 feet of vertical limestone, weathered smooth by 100 years of rain and wind. There are no decorative ledges for your fingers. There are no convenient wooden balconies or protruding bricks to serve as a ladder. The masons who built this place were not fools. They spent decades ensuring every surface was as flush and featureless as a frozen lake. Any gap in the mortar has been filled with lead or packed with sharp flint to discourage even the smallest of creatures from finding a foothold. Now consider the moat. You have heard poets sing of the shimmering waters surrounding a noble keep, but the reality beneath your nose is far more repulsive. This is not a fresh spring. This is a stagnant, black ring of sludge. It is the repository for everything the castle discards. It is thick with the runoff of the stables, the waste from the garderobes, and the rotting remains of kitchen scraps. If you try to swim it, the weight of your wet wool and leather will pull you down like an anchor. If you manage to stay afloat, the stench alone is enough to make you retch, and the risk of infection from a single scratch on your hand would mean a slow, agonizing death from fever long before you ever reached your target. You shift your weight, trying to stay hidden in the shadows, and you realize that the very ground you are standing on has been turned against you. The lord of this castle has cleared every tree, every bush, and every large rock for 200 yards around the walls. This is the glassy. It is a scorched earth policy in miniature. There is nowhere to hide. If a guard on the ramparts glances down, you will stand out like a fly on a white plate. You are not a ghost in the night. You are a target in an open field, and the only reason you are still breathing is because the sentry above is currently distracted by the task of lighting his pipe. Let us say you decide against the wall and the moat. You decide to try the gatehouse. This is the mouth of the beast. You look at the massive oak doors, reinforced with iron bands as thick as your arm. Even if you had a battering ram and 20 men, those doors would laugh at you. But you are one man. You see the portcullis, a heavy grating of iron-tipped timber, suspended by chains that could haul a ship. It sits there like a row of teeth, ready to drop at a moment's notice. If you were to somehow talk your way past the first gate, you would find yourself in the throat of the castle. This is a narrow passage where the architecture itself is designed to kill you. Look up. Those holes in the ceiling are not for ventilation. Those are murder holes. From the room above, soldiers are watching your every move. If they realize you do not belong, they will not just shoot you with arrows. They will pour sand that has been heated in a furnace until it glows red. This sand will find its way into the gaps of your tunic and sear your skin to the bone. They might drop heavy stones or pour boiling water. You are trapped in a stone box with no cover, while death rains down from a ceiling you cannot reach. You decide to retreat from the gate and look for another way. You think of the windows, but as you scan the heights, you realize there are no windows on the lower levels. There are only arrow slits. These are narrow, vertical gaps in the stone, barely wide enough for a man to slide his hand through. They are tapered on the inside, allowing a defender to see the entire field while remaining almost entirely invisible to you. To enter through an arrow slit, you would have to be a shadow or a liquid. You are neither. You are a person of flesh and bone, and the stone is much harder than you are. The physical exertion of just getting close to the inner keep is already beginning to wear on you. Your boots are heavy with mud, and the damp cold of the night air is seeping into your joints. This is the part of the job no one mentions. It is not about a quick dash and a strike. It is a slow, grueling siege of a single man against a mountain. Every inch you move forward requires a calculation of risk that would exhaust a scholar. You have to account for the patrols. You have to account for the dogs. Ah yes, the dogs. You hear a low growl from somewhere within the outer ward. In the medieval world, dogs are not pets. They are half-starved security systems with teeth like daggers. They do not care about your stealth. They do not care about how quietly you move. They smell your sweat. They smell the strange oils on your blade. They smell the fear coming off you in waves. A single bark will alert the entire garrison, and within seconds, the silence of the night will be shattered by the sound of iron boots on stone and the barking of orders. You find yourself pressing your back against a buttress, trying to become part of the rock. The wind whistles through the crenellations above, sounding like the whispers of the men who died trying to do exactly what you are doing now. You realize that the architecture is not just a physical barrier. It is a psychological one. It is built to make you feel small. It is built to make you feel like an intruder in a world that does not want you. The high ceilings of the Great Hall, the narrow, winding staircases that always turn to the right to favor a right-handed defender, the pitch-black corridors where you have no idea if the floor continues or drops away into a pit. Even the stairs are a weapon. Have you noticed how uneven they are? In a castle, the stairs are rarely uniform. One step will be 2 inches high, the next will be 5, and the third will be slightly tilted. The people who live here know these stairs by heart. They climb them every day in the dark. But you, a stranger in the shadows, will trip. You will stumble. Your foot will scuff against the stone. And in the echoing silence of a stone tower, that sound will ring out like a hammer on an anvil. You look across at the inner keep, the heart of the fortress. That is where your target sleeps, surrounded by layers of protection that have been refined over 1,000 years of warfare. To reach him, you must be perfect. You must be stronger than the stone, faster than the hound, and luckier than the man who built the walls. You realize that you are not just fighting a lord or his guards. You are fighting the very earth itself, reshaped by human hands into a monument of exclusion. The siege of a single man is a lonely, terrifying prospect. There is no glory here. There is only the cold pressure of the damp air and the realization that the fortress was not built to keep people out. It was built to make sure that anyone who tried to get in would never leave. You look at your hands, already scraped and bleeding from the rough masonry, and you wonder if you have the strength to climb even another 10 feet. The iron gates are shut. The stone walls are watching. And you are just a man with a piece of sharpened metal, standing in the dark, realizing that the castle has already won. The weight of the silence is heavy. You hear the distant clink of mail as a guard shifts his weight on the wall above. It is a soft sound, but in this environment it feels like a thunderclap. Every sense you have is dialed to its breaking point. You are hyper-aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, and the way your wool cloak rasps against the limestone. You realize that in this place, you are the only thing that does not belong. The stone belongs. The iron belongs. The cold belongs. You are the only foreign element in this perfect equation of defense. You take a slow, shaking breath and look toward the shadows of the inner bailey. There is no turning back now. To retreat is to be caught in the open. To stay still is to freeze. The only way is forward, into the heart of the stone labyrinth, where the walls are thicker, the gates are heavier, and the chance of survival drops with every step you take. You grip the hilt of your knife, but it offers little comfort. Against a fortress of this magnitude, your blade feels like a needle trying to pierce the hide of a dragon. You are one man against a mountain of stone, and the mountain does not care if you live or die. It only cares that its gates remain closed and its lord remains safe, tucked away behind 1,000 tons of silent, uncaring rock. You are standing in the knee-deep mud of the outer moat, and for the first time in your career, you are questioning every decision that led you to this moment. The stone walls of the keep tower above you, beautiful and terrifying in the moonlight, but you are not looking at the battlements or the banners fluttering in the night breeze. You are looking at a hole. It is a small, rectangular opening protruding from the side of the castle wall like a stone lip, and it is currently leaking a slow, viscous stream of black sludge into the stagnant water at your feet. This is your secret entrance. This is your golden ticket into the inner sanctum of the man you have been paid to kill. In the romantic stories told by minstrels in the town square, the assassin scales the wall with silken ropes or slips through the gate disguised as a wandering monk. But you know better. The guards at the gate are not stupid, and the walls are designed to be impossible to climb. The only way in is the way that no sane human being would ever think to guard. You are going up the latrine chute. To understand why you are about to do this, you have to understand the architecture of medieval hygiene. Most castles used a system called a garderobe. It was a small room, often no bigger than a closet, built into the thickness of the outer wall. Inside, there was a simple wooden or stone bench with a hole cut into it. That hole led directly to a vertical shaft that dropped straight down the outside of the castle wall or into a hidden channel within the stone. At the bottom, everything simply fell into the moat or a designated cesspit. It was a marvel of medieval engineering that kept the living quarters from smelling like a barn. But for someone like you, it represents a fatal flaw in the fortress. As you step closer to the opening, the smell hits you like a physical blow. It is not just the scent of waste. It is a concentrated, fermented, and ancient stench that has been baking in the sun and rotting in the damp for years. It smells of ammonia that stings your eyes and rot that makes your stomach attempt to turn itself inside out. You pull a scrap of linen over your nose and mouth, but it does nothing. The smell is a heavy, oily thing that coats your skin the moment you move into the shadow of the chute. You reach out and grab the stone edges of the opening. It is slick. It is covered in a layer of moss, algae, and things you refuse to name. You have to pull yourself up into the darkness. There are no ladders here. There are no handholds provided for your convenience. You have to use a technique called chimneying. You press your back against one side of the narrow stone shaft and your feet against the other. You exert outward pressure using the friction to hold your body weight, and then you begin the slow, agonizing crawl upward. Every inch is a battle. Your boots slip on the slime. Your woolen tunic, which you once thought was quite comfortable, begins to soak up the moisture from the walls. It becomes heavy and cold, clinging to your skin like a dead weight. And then there is the darkness. You are inside a stone tube barely wider than your shoulders. There is no light from above because the garderobe door is likely closed. There is only the dim, gray reflection of the moon below you, which grows smaller and smaller as you ascend. You are alone in a vertical tunnel of filth, listening to the sound of your own frantic breathing and the distant drip, drip, drip of water. Then you hear a sound above you. It is the creak of a heavy wooden door. You freeze. Your muscles are screaming from the effort of holding yourself in place, but you dare not move. Above you, you hear footsteps on floorboards. You hear the rustle of heavy fabric. And then you hear the sound of a lid being lifted. You squeeze your eyes shut and pray to every saint you can remember. This is the ultimate indignity of the medieval assassin. You are trapped in a narrow pipe, and someone is about to use the facilities. You hold your breath as the gravity of the situation literally falls upon you. There is no dodging in a space this tight. There is only endurance. When the moment passes and the door above finally clicks shut, you are left trembling, covered in the fresh evidence of your profession. You want to scream, you want to climb back down and jump into the cleanest river you can find, but you can't. You have come too far. If you go back now, you have suffered for nothing. So you keep climbing. Finally, your head bumps against something solid. It is the underside of the seat. You reach up, your fingers fumbling in the dark, and find the edge of the hole. With a heave that feels like it might snap your spine, you push yourself upward and scramble through the opening. You tumble onto the floor of the garderobe, gasping for air that is slightly less foul than the air in the shaft, though not by much. You are inside. You have bypassed the gatehouse, the portcullis, the barking dogs, and the sharp-eyed sentries. But your problems are only just beginning. You stand up, and the first thing you notice is the sound. In a quiet stone castle at midnight, the wet, heavy squelch of your boots sounds like a drumbeat. Every movement you make is accompanied by the sound of dripping liquid. You are leaving a literal trail of filth on the expensive rushes and rugs of the inner keep. If a guard happens to walk by, he doesn't even need to see you to know you are there. He will smell you from the other end of the corridor. This is the reality of stealth that the stories never mention. You cannot be a ghost when you carry the odor of 1,000 men with you. You have to move with a terrifying level of speed and precision because your window of anonymity is closing fast. The stench is so powerful that it will wake sleeping hounds. It will alert the servants who are used to the general odors of the Middle Ages, but are certainly not used to the concentrated essence of the cesspit walking down the hallway. And then, there is the physical danger to yourself. In an age before antibiotics, what you have just done is a form of slow-motion suicide. Your skin is likely covered in tiny scratches from the rough stone of the chute. Those scratches are now filled with the most bacteria-ridden substance on Earth. Even if you succeed in your mission, even if you kill the Lord and escape back down that same disgusting pipe, you are very likely going to die of a fever within a week. You are a walking infection. Your eyes will start to itch, your throat will swell, and your blood will turn sour. You have traded your long-term health for a few moments of tactical surprise. You creep down the hallway, pressing yourself into the shadows. You see a guard at the far end, his back to you. You hold your breath, not because you are afraid of being heard, but because you are afraid the air you exhale will carry the scent of the chute to his nose. He shifts his weight, his armor clanking softly. He sniffs the air. He looks confused. He turns his head slightly, trying to catch the source of the sudden, foul breeze that has just entered the hallway. You realize that your greatest enemy right now is not his sword or his training. It is the very physics of the air in the room. You manage to slip into a side chamber just as he turns around. You are heart pounding, your skin crawling with the sensation of what is clinging to your clothes. You look down at your hands in the faint light of a dying wall torch. They are stained and shaking. This is not the glory of the shadow warrior. This is the desperate, disgusting work of a person who has run out of options. You are a professional, yes. You are a killer of men. But in this moment, you are just a man covered in waste, shivering in the dark, waiting for the chance to strike so that you can finally, mercifully, go home and scrub your skin until it bleeds. The target is just through the next door. You can hear his steady, rhythmic snoring. He is safe. He is warm. He is tucked away behind those 1,000 tons of silent rock that we talked about before. He thinks he is untouchable because the gates are barred and the walls are high. He doesn't realize that the very system designed to keep his home clean has provided a highway for his demise. You reach for the handle of the door, your wet glove slipping slightly on the cold iron. You take a deep breath, steeling yourself for the final act, and you realize that even if you succeed, you will never truly be clean again. The memory of that climb, the weight of the air in that shaft, and the sheer, humiliating stench of your own success will stay with you long after the gold is spent. This is the price of entry. This is the secret cost of the blade in the dark. You are the man in the cesspit, and the world will never know the foulness you endured to change the course of history. You have spent weeks in the shadows. You have memorized the rhythmic clatter of the night watchman on the cobblestones. You have calculated the exact moment the moonlight leaves the narrow alleyway in total darkness. Your heart beats in your ears, a steady, heavy drum that feels loud enough to wake the entire city of Florence. In your hand, the cold weight of a rondel dagger feels like an extension of your own arm. You have been told that a single, precise thrust will end the life of the man who stands between your employer and a throne. You believe the stories you have heard in the taverns, the tales of silent shadows who slide a blade between ribs as easily as a needle through silk. But as you step from behind the heavy tapestry in the darkened hall, you are about to learn the most gruesome lesson of your short, violent life. The human body is not a silk cushion. It is a fortress of bone, sinew, and stubborn, screaming life. When the blade meets the bone, the fantasy of the clean kill vanishes instantly. You strike from the dark, aiming for the soft space beneath the shoulder blade, just as you practiced on the straw dummy in the cellar. But the dummy did not move. The dummy did not wear a heavy tunic of boiled leather and thick wool. As your hand drives forward, the tip of your dagger catches on a seam of reinforced fabric. The momentum is there, but the angle is wrong. Instead of sliding deep into the lungs, the steel strikes the flat, hard plate of the scapula. The sound is something you will never forget. It is not a cinematic thud. It is a sharp, wet crack that vibrates up the length of the blade, through the hilt, and directly into the bones of your own wrist. It feels like hitting a stone wall with a hammer. Your hand jars painfully, and for a terrifying second, your grip loosens on the leather-wrapped handle. This is the first failure. In the manuals of the Masters of Defense, they talk about the perfect line of attack, but they rarely mention the physical shock of impact. Your victim does not simply slump to the floor. He gasps, a sharp, ragged sound of sudden, incomprehensible agony, and he turns. This is where the business becomes a butcher's shop. Because you failed to kill him in the first second, you are no longer an assassin. You are a man in a desperate, sweating wrestling match with a frantic animal. The target, a man you thought of only as a political obstacle, is now a thrashing, screaming reality. He claws at your face. He smells of expensive wine and old sweat. His eyes, wide and white in the dim light, are locked onto yours. You strike again, blindly this time, fueled by a panicked surge of adrenaline that makes your movements clumsy and heavy. The second strike finds the neck, but not the way you intended. You miss the carotid artery and instead slice through the heavy muscles of the shoulder and the side of the throat. Blood does not merely trickle. It arterial sprays. It is hot, surprisingly hot, and within seconds, your hands are coated in a slick, metallic-smelling lubricant. This is the secret reality of the botch job. Blood is the enemy of the assassin. It makes your weapon impossible to hold. As you try to pull the dagger back for a third strike, your fingers slide uselessly over the hilt. The knife, once a symbol of your power, is now a greasy, dangerous toy. You find yourself leaning your entire body weight against the man, trying to pin him to the wall, trying to find a way to end the noise. Because the noise is the most dangerous thing of all. In your imagination, the victim died in a whisper. In reality, he is making a sound like a broken bellows. He is gurgling, coughing, and trying to shout for his guards. Every second that he remains alive is a second closer to your own execution. The physical exertion required to kill a man who does not want to die is staggering. You are breathing as hard as if you had run a mile. Your muscles ache from the strain of holding down his flailing limbs. You realize with a sinking horror that the human body is incredibly resilient. People have survived dozens of stab wounds in the heat of a fray. You cannot just wait for him to bleed out. You have to finish it. You drop the knife. It clatters loudly on the stone floor, a sound that seems to echo through the entire palace. You reach for your backup, a heavy, short-bladed bowl-lock dagger, but your hands are too slippery to draw it easily from its sheath. You are reduced to using your hands, your knees, and the blunt force of your own body. You are no longer a phantom of the night. You are a frantic laborer performing the most honest and most horrible work imaginable. You find yourself kneeling on his chest, your weight crushing his ribs, as you finally manage to drive a blade into the soft tissue under the chin. There is a resistance, a horrific grinding feeling as the steel passes through the tongue and into the base of the brain. Finally, the struggling stops. The tension leaves his body, and he becomes a heavy, inert weight beneath you. But you are not done. You are covered in him. Your clothes are soaked. The iron scent of blood is so thick you can taste it in the back of your throat. This is the moment when the reality of the medieval assassin's life truly sets in. There is no magic spell to clean your cloak. There is no back alley where you can simply blend in. You are a walking crime scene. Every step you take will leave a tacky, red footprint. If a guard stops you now, there is no explanation. no lie that can save you. You are a marked man. Think of the historical accounts of the murder of Thomas Becket in the cathedral at Canterbury. It was not a clean affair. The 4 knights who fell upon him did not simply strike once. They hacked at him. One blow was so powerful it sliced off the top of his skull, and the chroniclers of the time described the gruesome scene of his brains spilling onto the stone floor. It took multiple men and multiple strikes to end the life of one unarmed cleric. Or consider the assassination of Galeazzo Maria Sforza, the Duke of Milan, in the church of Santo Stefano. 3 assassins attacked him simultaneously. They stabbed him in the chest, the stomach, and the back. Even then, amidst the chaos of the choir boys singing and the smoke of the incense, it was a bloody, frantic mess that ended with the assassins being hunted down and torn apart by the mob. This is the part of the story that the romantic ballads skip over. They do not tell you about the way the bone can notch your blade, making it useless for the next strike. They do not tell you about the way a victim's ribs can act like a cage, catching your knife and snapping the tip off. They do not tell you about the sheer, grueling physical labor of murder. In the Middle Ages, there were no silencers. There were no long-range rifles that allowed you to remain detached from the act. To be an assassin was to be a butcher. You had to be close enough to feel your victim's breath on your skin. You had to be strong enough to overpower a man fighting for his very existence. And if you botched it, if your first strike was not perfect, you were trapped in a nightmare. A botched business meant a loud business. It meant a long business. Every extra second you spent trying to find a vital organ was a second where the doors could burst open, where the torches of the guard could illuminate your failure. The psychological toll of this is immense. You are not just a killer. You are a witness to the incredible, messy difficulty of ending a life. You see the light go out of the eyes, not in a flash, but in a slow, agonizing stutter. As you stand over the body in the dark hall, the silence returns, but it is a heavy, suffocating silence. You are exhausted. Your hands are shaking so violently you can barely pick up your discarded knife. You realize that you were lied to. The blade does not always slide in easily. The bone is always there, waiting to catch the steel, waiting to betray you. You are a professional, or so you thought, but in the aftermath of a botched strike, you feel like nothing more than a terrified child covered in the consequences of a terrible mistake. You have changed history, perhaps, but you have done it with the grace of a slaughterhouse floor. You turn to run, but the weight of the act clings to you like the wet wool of your blood-stained sleeves. This is the true burden of the blade. It is not the weight of the steel, but the resistance of the bone. You leave the room not as a hero of the shadows, but as a man who has looked into the red, wet machinery of life and realized just how hard it is to break. The door clicks shut behind you. You are back in the hallway, and for a heartbeat, the world is unervingly silent. The heavy, metallic scent of the room you just left still clings to the back of your throat, and your hands are shaking with a violence you cannot control. This is the moment they never show you in the stories. They show the strike. They show the shadow slipping away into the night. They do not show the sheer, staggering weight of the realization that you are now a dead man walking within a cage of stone and iron. You have committed the ultimate sin in a world obsessed with hierarchy. You have broken the great chain of being. And now, the entire machinery of the medieval world is about to grind into motion to crush you. You take your first step away from the scene, and your boots sound like thunderclaps on the stone floor. Every shadow looks like a guard. Every flickering torchlight is an eye. In your mind, you had a plan. You would slip out the side door, cross the courtyard, and vanish into the city. But the city is not a place of freedom. It is a trap. In the 14th century, there is no such thing as a clean getaway. You are not just running from a few guards. You are running from the law of the hue and cry. This is a fundamental pillar of medieval justice. When a crime is discovered, the witness is legally obligated to raise the alarm, to shout at the top of their lungs. Once that cry starts, every able-bodied man within earshot is legally required to drop what they are doing and join the chase. If they see you running and they do not try to stop you, they are as guilty as you are. You are not being hunted by a professional police force. You are being hunted by an entire town. You reach the courtyard, and the cold night air hits you like a physical blow. It should be refreshing, but instead, it carries the first sound of your doom. A shout comes from the room you just left. A servant has entered. A guard has checked the door. It does not matter who. What matters is the sound that follows. It is a high, thin wail that transforms into a rhythmic yelling. Murder! Murder! The cry is picked up by another voice, and then another. It ripples outward like a stone thrown into a still pond. You hear the first bell begin to toll. It is not the slow, melodic chime of a call to prayer. It is the clanging, frantic beat of the alarm. Within seconds, the entire castle, the entire manor, the entire monastery is awake. You break into a run. Your lungs burn. Your wool tunic, heavy with sweat and perhaps a few dark spatters you cannot see in the dark, feels like it weighs 50 pounds. You scramble over a low wall, your hands scraping against the rough, cold stone. You drop into the mud of a side street, and for a moment you are in darkness. But the darkness is your enemy as much as the light. Medieval cities are not laid out on grids. They are organic, chaotic tangles of alleys that lead nowhere. They are built to keep people in and enemies out. There are no streetlights. There are no maps. There is only the filth under your feet and the towering overhangs of timber-framed houses that seem to lean in to watch you pass. You turn a corner and find yourself chest-deep in a pile of rotting refuse and animal waste. The smell is enough to make you retch, but you push through it. You have to get to the gates. That was the plan. If you can get outside the walls, you have a chance. You can lose yourself in the woods. You can disappear into the dark maw of the countryside. But here is the reality of the medieval city. The gates are closed. At sunset, the great iron-shod timber doors are swung shut and barred with beams of oak that take 4 men to lift. They will not open until dawn. To get out, you would need to find a postern gate, a small, secret exit used by messengers or workers, but those are always guarded. Even if you knew where one was, the guards have already heard the bells. They are already lowering their pikes. You are trapped in a stone box with thousands of people who want your head on a spike. You hear the sound of dogs. This is another terror the stories omit. The medieval world is full of dogs, and they are not the soft, pampered pets of the modern age. They are half-wild scavengers and trained killers. They are mastiffs with jaws that can snap a man's femur like a dry twig. They are scent hounds that can track the metallic tang of blood and the sour stench of your fear through the thickest mud of the slums. You hear them baying in the distance, a sound that chills your marrow more than the cold wind ever could. You duck into an alcove as a group of men runs past. They are not soldiers. They are butchers and tanners, still wearing their leather aprons, carrying torches and heavy wooden clubs. Their faces are twisted with a mix of terror and bloodlust. In a world where there is no professional police force, the community protects itself with a savage efficiency. They do not want to arrest you. They want to tear you apart. You realize now that your disguise is useless. In the chaos, anyone who is running, anyone who looks out of place, anyone who is covered in the grime of the gutters is a target. If you are caught, there will be no trial. There will be no long interrogation in a dungeon. There will be the swift, chaotic justice of the mob. Your heart is a drum in your chest, beating out a rhythm of panic. You think of the horse you had hoped to steal. But where would you go? A horse on the cobbled streets makes a sound that can be heard for miles. A man on horseback at midnight is a beacon. And the moment you reach the wall, the horse becomes a liability, a large, frightened animal that will only draw more attention to your location. You consider the river. Many medieval cities are built on the water. If you could dive into the dark, freezing currents of the Thames or the Seine or the Danube, you might float past the walls. But the river is a graveyard. It is filled with the debris of a city, with stakes driven into the mud to catch boats, and with nets meant to haul in fish. The water is so cold it would seize your muscles in minutes. You are running out of options. You are running out of breath. The bells are louder now, joined by the blowing of horns. The city is a living thing, and it is trying to purge you like a toxin. You see a church ahead. The heavy oak doors are carved with saints who look down at you with stony indifference. In the medieval world, there is the concept of sanctuary. If you can reach the altar, if you can grab the ring on the door or sit upon the footstool, the law of man stops at the threshold. The church can protect you. For 40 days you can sit within those cold stone walls, and the mob cannot touch you. You lunge for the door. Your fingers brush the iron ring. For a second, a spark of hope flares. But then you remember what sanctuary actually means. It is not freedom. It is a slow, agonizing wait for a different kind of end. While you are inside, the guards will be outside every door, every window, and every crack in the stone. They will wait. They will starve you out. Or, more likely, they will offer you a choice. You can come out and face the executioner, or you can abjure the realm. To abjure the realm is to admit your guilt, to give up everything you own, and to be marched to the nearest port, barefoot and dressed in a sackcloth tunic, carrying a wooden cross. You would be a pariah, a man without a country, a man who can be killed by anyone who finds him once he leaves the designated path. And that is if the mob does not pull you from the church steps before you even reach the altar. The sound of the dogs is closer now. You can hear the splashing of feet in the mud just one street over. You cannot stay here. You turn away from the church and keep running, but your legs are turning to lead. This is the physical reality of the escape. It is not a graceful climb over rooftops. Medieval roofs are made of slippery thatch or heavy, unstable tiles. They are steeply pitched and crumble under the weight of a man. One wrong step and you go through the ceiling of a sleeping family, or you fall 30 feet into the darkness of an alleyway, breaking your legs and waiting for the hounds to find you. There is no way out. The realization hits you with more force than a mace. The medieval world is a series of concentric circles, and you are at the very center with every circle closing in. You are a man who has committed a crime in an age where there is nowhere to hide. You find yourself in a dead end. A high stone wall looms before you, slick with moss and rain. Behind you, the torches are turning the corner. The light spills across the wet stones, yellow and flickering, casting long, monstrous shadows. You can hear the heavy breathing of the men, the clanking of their mail, and the growl of the dogs who have caught your scent. You press your back against the cold wall. You look at your hands, still stained with the work you did in that silent room. You realize that the act of the kill was the easiest part of your night. The shadows that you thought were your friends have betrayed you. They have retreated, leaving you standing in the light of 100 torches. The escape was always a lie. In the medieval mind, justice is not just a legal concept. It is a divine necessity. The world cannot function if a king or a lord is struck down and the killer walks free. The very earth would cry out. And as you see the first of the guards level his crossbow at your chest, you realize that the earth is indeed crying out. It is crying out for you. You are not a ghost. You are not a legend. You are just a tired, terrified man trapped in a dark alley, waiting for the inevitable end of a story that was written the moment you picked up the blade. The hounds are no longer at your heel. They are at your throat. And as the first hand reaches out to grab your collar, you finally understand why there are so few stories of the medieval assassins who grew old. It is because the world they lived in was built to ensure they never would. You are the prey now, and the hunt is over. The grip on your arm is iron. The shouting drowns out the bells. And as you are dragged back toward the light, toward the center of the city, toward the platform that is already being prepared in the square, you realize that the hardest part was never the killing. It was the living that came after. The gates remain closed. The bells continue to ring. And the night, which started with such quiet purpose, ends in a cacophony of justice that will not stop until your heart does. You are caught. And in this world, being caught is the only thing that was ever truly certain. The near impossibility of the escape was not a flaw in your plan. It was the fundamental design of the world you tried to change. You walk now not toward freedom, but toward the final, crushing embrace of the law you thought you could defy. The city settles into a watchful, predatory silence. The hunt is over. The hounds are fed. And the man who tried to change history finds himself crushed by the very weight of it. You are the center of attention now, but not in the way you dreamed. You are the victim of the very world you sought to strike, and the price of your ambition is finally, fully due. As the first light of dawn begins to gray the eastern sky, you see the outlines of the gallows rising like a skeletal hand from the earth. It is the final destination of every path you took tonight. The escape was a dream. This is the reality. This is why it sucked to be a medieval assassin. Because in the end, the world always catches up. And when it does not forgive. It only concludes. Your story is finished, written in the cold stone and the heavy air of a world that has no room for men who work in the dark. The last thing you hear is the sound of the city waking up, indifferent to your fate, moving on as if you had never been there at all. The great machine continues to turn, and you are just another piece of grit that has been ground away. The escape is over. The end has arrived. You wake up to the sound of water dripping against stone, but you cannot move your hands to wipe the moisture from your eyes. The darkness is thick, heavy, and smells of old straw and human fear. This is the moment every assassin dreads, the moment where the shadows you once called your allies have finally turned their backs on you. You are no longer the ghost in the hallway or the whisper in the dark. You are a body, a physical object owned by the state, and your failure has signed a contract with a type of pain that most people cannot even imagine in their worst nightmares. The medieval world does not believe in quick endings for people like you. To strike at a lord, a bishop, or a king is not just a crime against a person. It is viewed as a crime against the very order of the universe. You have tried to sever a limb from the body of society, and in return, society is going to systematically dismantle your own. You hear the heavy thud of leather boots on the stairs outside your cell. This is not the jailer bringing you a crust of bread. This is the beginning of the end. When they drag you out into the light, the sun is blinding, but it brings no warmth. You are paraded through the streets on a wooden cart, your hands bound tight with rough hemp rope that bites into your wrists. The crowd is already there. They have been waiting for hours. In the medieval mind, an execution is not just a punishment. It is a holy performance, a grisly theater designed to show what happens to those who dare to defy the natural hierarchy. You see faces twisted in anger, hear the screams of insults, and feel the impact of rotten fruit and stones against your skin. You are already broken in spirit, but your body is still intact, and that is what they have come to see changed. You reach the center of the square where a large wooden structure has been erected. It is not a gallows. A hanging would be too merciful, too quick. Instead, you see the wheel. It is a massive, heavy thing, taken from a great wagon, reinforced with iron bands. It sits horizontally on a pivot, or sometimes it is laid flat on the ground with wooden blocks placed beneath your limbs. The executioner stands there, his face obscured or perhaps remarkably ordinary, holding a heavy iron bar. This is the tool of his trade, and he knows exactly how to use it. They stretch you out across the wheel. Your arms and legs are tied to the spokes, leaving your joints positioned over the gaps. The crowd goes silent for a heartbeat, the kind of silence that feels heavier than the iron bar itself. Then it begins. The first blow is not meant to kill you. It is meant to shatter. When the iron hits your forearm, you do not just feel the pain. You hear it. It is a dry, sickening snap, like a dead branch breaking in the woods, but it is happening inside your own flesh. The shock is a white-hot flash that radiates from the point of impact to the very center of your brain. You try to scream, but the air has been knocked out of your lungs. The executioner is methodical. He does not rush. He moves to the other arm, then the thighs, then the shins. Each blow is a calculated measurement of force. He is careful not to hit your chest or your head, at least not yet. They want you conscious. They want you to feel the weight of your failure in every splintered bone. By the time he is finished with the first round, your limbs are no longer straight. They are woven through the spokes of the wheel, twisted into unnatural angles that the human body was never meant to occupy. You are no longer a person. You are a broken knot of meat and bone, displayed for the heavens and the earth to see. In some regions, they call this being broken from the bottom up. If the judge was feeling particularly vengeful, you might be left there for hours or even days as the sun beats down on you and the birds begin to circle. Every breath is a labor, a struggle against the gravity that pulls at your shattered frame. The crowd watches, some with horror, some with a grim sense of satisfaction. They believe that by watching your suffering, they are participating in the restoration of justice. Your blood on the stones is the ink that rewrites the laws you tried to break. But perhaps your target was even higher. Perhaps you aimed for a king. If that is the case, the wheel is only the beginning. You might face the terrifying prospect of being drawn and quartered. You are tied to 4 powerful horses, each tethered to one of your limbs. The tension is gradual at first. You feel your shoulders and hips being pulled from their sockets. It is a slow, grinding agony as the ligaments stretch and finally tear. The horses are urged forward, and the physical reality of what is happening transcends anything the mind can process. You are literally being pulled out of yourself, divided into 4 pieces that will be sent to the 4 corners of the kingdom as a warning to anyone else who might harbor thoughts of rebellion. There is a strange, dark theology behind this brutality. The medieval authorities believe that through this extreme physical suffering, you might actually find a way to purge your soul before the end. They see the pain as a gift, a chance to pay for your sins on earth so that you might not have to pay for them for eternity in the fires of hell. The priest stands near your ear, whispering prayers and asking for your confession even as the iron bar falls again and again. He is looking for a sign of repentance, a tear or a whispered plea for mercy, not from the law, but from God. As the hours pass and the light begins to fade, your consciousness starts to slip. The world becomes a blur of gray stone and red stains. The voices of the crowd sound like they are coming from underwater. You realize now that the life of an assassin was always a gamble where the house held all the cards. You traded the safety of a common life for the chance at a moment of historical impact, and this is the price of the wager you lost. The glory you imagined is nowhere to be found. There is only the cold iron, the heavy wood, and the relentless machinery of a state that does not know how to forgive. The executioner finally approaches for the blow of mercy. He raises the iron bar one last time, aiming for your chest or your neck. It is the final note in a long, dissonant symphony of suffering. As the blow falls, the last thing you see is the sky, vast and indifferent to the tiny, broken thing you have become. Your name will be forgotten, or worse, it will be remembered only as a footnote in the story of the person you failed to kill. The shadows have finally claimed you, not as their master, but as their victim. The smell of wood smoke and old blood lingers in the air as the crowd begins to disperse. They go back to their homes, to their dinners and their families, carrying the memory of your end as a story to tell their children. You were the man who thought he could change the world with a blade, but the world answered back with a wheel. In the medieval era, the cost of failure was not just death. It was the total and systematic destruction of the self, a public dismantling of everything you were and everything you hoped to be. The transition from the silent predator to the shattered spectacle is complete. The price has been paid in full, bone by bone, breath by breath, until nothing remains but the silence of the square and the cold, unyielding stones. You might have thought you were different. You might have believed your cause was just or your skill was unmatched. But in the end, the iron bar does not care about your reasons. It only cares about the physics of the strike. The medieval world was a place of hard edges and unforgiving justice, where the body was the canvas upon which the law wrote its most terrible lessons. To be an assassin was to walk a tightrope over a pit of fire, and you have finally lost your balance. The ground here is hard, and the fall has lasted a lifetime. As the darkness finally settles in, the pain begins to recede, replaced by a cold void where your ambitions once lived. You are gone, and the wheel continues to turn, indifferent to the broken spirit it has left behind. The heavy gates of the city close for the night, and the echoes of the day's events fade into the rustle of the wind. Somewhere in another tavern, in another dark corner, someone else is sharpening a blade, dreaming of the same glory that led you here. They do not see the wheel. They do not feel the iron. They only see the target. But you know the truth now. You know that the distance between a hero and a heap of broken bones is only a single misstep, a single heartbeat of hesitation. The price of failure is not just the end of your life, but the slow, agonizing realization that in the eyes of the world, you are nothing more than a warning. The story of the medieval assassin is not one of shadows and steel, but of the terrible, crushing weight of the light when the shadows finally fail you. The silence is total now. The square is empty. The wheel stands alone under the stars, a grim monument to a failed ambition. Your journey has reached its conclusion, not in a palace or a throne room, but here, in the dirt, where all things eventually return. The bone is broken, the spirit is spent, and the price has been paid. The world moves on, indifferent to the ghost you have become, leaving only the cold, hard memory of the gruesome price of failure. The heavy thud of the final blow still vibrates in the air, a phantom sound that haunts the corners of the square. It serves as a reminder to the city that the order of things is absolute. No matter how sharp the knife or how quiet the footfall, the law has 1,000 eyes and 1,000 iron bars. You were a ripple in the water that the pond has already forgotten. Your struggle, your fear, and your final agonizing breaths are swallowed by the history of a time that valued the strength of the collective over the rebellion of the individual. The fire in your veins has cooled, and the long, dark night of the forgotten has begun. There is no more pain, no more failure, and no more shadows. There is only the quiet, and the cold, and the end. In those final moments, as your spirit unspools from your shattered frame, you realize the ultimate irony of your profession. You spent your life trying to master the art of death, to become its dealer and its architect. You studied the anatomy of your targets, looking for the soft spots, the places where a soul could be let out with a minimum of fuss. But in the end, it was death that mastered you. It was your own anatomy that was studied, your own soft spots that were exploited by the heavy hands of the law. You became the very thing you sought to create, a cold reminder of mortality, a body reduced to its most basic broken elements. The master of the blade ended his days as the victim of the bar, and the silence that follows is the only legacy you have left behind. The stars above the square do not flicker. They watch with the same cold detachment they have shown for 1,000 years, witnessing the rise and fall of kings and the broken ends of those who tried to topple them. Your story is woven into the stones now, a dark thread in the tapestry of a brutal age. To be a medieval assassin was to gamble with the only thing you truly owned, and when the dice stopped rolling, the house took everything. The price was high, the pain was absolute, and the failure was final. As the last embers of your consciousness flicker out, the wheel remains, a silent witness to the reality of a life lived and lost in the shadows. The morning will bring the scavengers and the cleaners, those whose job it is to remove the remnants of the spectacle and prepare the square for the next day of commerce. Life will resume its frantic, mundane pace. Merchants will hawk their wares where your blood once pooled, and children will play where you took your final breath. The world is efficient in its forgetting. It has to be to survive the darkness of the times. You are a memory fading into the gray mist of. The blood on your hands is finally dry, but the cold sweat on your neck is fresh. You have done exactly what was asked of you. You moved through the shadows like a whisper, you bypassed the guards, and you ended a life that stood in the way of someone else's ambition. In the songs of the future, this is where you would collect a heavy purse of gold and disappear into a quiet retirement in a distant coastal town. But you are not living in a song. You are standing in the damp, lightless reality of the Middle Ages, and you have just realized the most terrifying truth of your profession. The person who paid you to kill is the person who now has the greatest motivation to see you dead. Think about the position you have put your employer in. You are a living, breathing piece of evidence. You are the physical manifestation of their greatest sin and their most dangerous secret. In a world where the word of a nobleman is supposed to be his bond and his honor is his currency, you are the proof that he is a liar and a murderer by proxy. Every moment you draw breath, you are a liability. You are a loose thread that can unravel a dynasty if you are ever caught, or if you ever decide that a rival bidder has a more attractive offer. You walk toward the meeting place. It is not a grand hall or a brightly lit tavern. It is usually somewhere that smells of rot and wet stone, perhaps a cellar under a tanner's shop or a lonely stretch of woods where the mud clings to your boots like a drowning man. Your heart hammers against your ribs, not because of the crime you committed, but because of the transaction that is about to occur. You are walking into the presence of a man who has already proven he is willing to pay for a murder. Why should you believe he would not pay for one more, especially when the target is the only witness to his previous crime? As you enter the space, you see him, your paymaster. He does not look like a grateful partner. He looks at you with a mixture of loathing and absolute terror. To him, you are no longer a useful tool. You are a monster that he invited into his life, and now that the task is finished, he wants the monster gone. He knows that if you were capable of slipping into a lord's bedchamber to slit a throat, you are just as capable of doing the same to him if the payment is delayed or if your loyalty shifts. This is the paranoia of the paymaster, and it is a poison that infects every word spoken in this room. You notice things that a normal man would miss. You see the way his hand rests near the hilt of his dagger. You notice the two shadows moving behind the crates in the corner, shadows that should not be there if this was a simple exchange of coin. You realize that the gold you were promised might not be in that heavy leather bag on the table. It might be a bag of lead weights, a distraction meant to keep your eyes down while a garrote is slipped over your head from behind. The Middle Ages offered no legal protection for your trade. You cannot go to the magistrate if you are cheated. You cannot sue for breach of contract. There is no guild that will avenge your death or demand fair wages. You are an outlaw in the truest sense of the word. You exist entirely outside the protection of the law and the church. If your employer decides to have his men butcher you right here in this cellar, your body will be thrown into a shallow pit or weighed down with stones and dropped into the river. No one will come looking for you. No one will care that you were cheated. This is the great irony of the medieval assassin. To be successful, you must be a master of trust. You must trust your informants, you must trust your equipment, and most importantly, you must trust the person who hired you. Yet, the very nature of the job attracts the most untrustworthy people in existence. You are dealing with men who want power without the courage to take it openly. You are dealing with people who value their reputation above human life. For such a person, killing a low-born mercenary like you is not a moral dilemma. It is a necessary bit of housekeeping. You stand there, 5 paces apart, and the silence is so thick you can hear the flickering of the single tallow candle. You see the paymaster's eyes darting toward the exit. He is wondering if his hired thugs are in position. You are wondering if you should have brought a crossbow instead of a knife. This is not a meeting of allies. It is a standoff between two predators who both know that only one of them needs to survive the night for the secret to remain safe. If he gives you the gold, he knows you might spend it in a way that draws attention. You might get drunk in a port town and brag about the time you killed a duke. You might fall on hard times and decide to blackmail him for more money next year. To a man of power, you are a ticking time bomb. The cheapest and most effective way to ensure your silence is not a bribe, but a grave. Dead men do not talk, they do not blackmail, and they certainly do not testify before a king's council. You have to wonder, as you reach for the bag of coins, how many others have stood exactly where you are standing. How many other wraiths were sent out into the night, only to disappear once their work was done. You realize that you are part of a cycle of disposability. The nobility uses the peasantry to fight their wars, and they use people like you to fight their private feuds. In both cases, the pawns are never meant to leave the board once the game is over. If you are smart, you do not take the bag. You do not turn your back. You back away into the darkness, leaving the gold on the table, because you realize that the gold is a tether. It is a trail of breadcrumbs that can be followed. But you are hungry, and you are tired, and you have risked everything for this payout. So you take the risk, You reach out, your fingers brushing the cold leather of the purse, and you feel the sudden shift in the room. The air grows colder. The shadows in the corner move. The paranoia of the paymaster is not just about his fear of you. It is also about his own guilt. By killing you, he can pretend that the murder never happened. He can wipe the slate clean. If the person who did the deed is gone, then in his twisted mind, the deed itself is erased. He wants to return to his world of silk robes and church services, and he cannot do that as long as you are walking the streets as a reminder of what he truly is. You realize now that the most dangerous part of the mission was never the infiltration. It was not the climb up the castle walls or the moment you stood over the sleeping target. The most dangerous part is this moment, the aftermath, where the person who called you a friend yesterday realizes you are a threat today. You are a witness to a crime that has no statute of limitations. You are a piece of his soul that he wants to cut out and throw away. As you slip back into the night, clutching the coins, you know that you are being followed. You can hear the rhythmic clatter of boots on cobblestones, far enough back to stay out of sight, but close enough to keep pace. Your employer has sent his own house guards to finish the job. They are the clean hands coming to wash away the dirty tool. This is the life you chose, or perhaps the life that chose you because you had no other options. You will spend the rest of your days looking over your shoulder. Every time a stranger smiles at you in a tavern, you will wonder if they have been sent by the man you once served. Every time a door creaks in the wind, you will reach for your blade. You have the gold, yes, but you have also inherited the paymaster's paranoia. It is a heavy burden to carry, heavier than any purse of coins. The trust between a master and a servant is a fragile thing even in the best of times. But in your world, trust is a fairy tale told to children. There is only interest and there is only fear. Your interest was the gold. His fear is your existence. Those two things can never coexist for long. You walk faster, blending into the fog, knowing that the man who paid you is currently sitting in his comfortable chair, praying to a God he does not believe in that you die before morning. You are a memory he wants to forget, a shadow he wants to banish, and a ghost that refuses to stay in the grave. This is the ultimate cost of your trade. You are never truly free of the job because the person who hired you will never be free of the memory of what you did for them. You are bound together by blood, and in the medieval world, that bond is usually only broken by more blood. You keep moving, a wraith in the mist, wondering if the next shadow you encounter will be yours or the one sent to take your place. You have probably heard the stories of the Master of Shadows, the legendary figure who stalks the corridors of power for decades, growing old and wise while their enemies fall like autumn leaves. It is a comforting thought, is it not? The idea that if you are just fast enough, clever enough, and quiet enough, you can beat the odds. But as you crouch in the damp corner of a hayloft, nursing a fever from a jagged cut that refuses to close, the truth begins to settle into your bones like the winter chill. In the medieval world, an assassin does not retire. There are no pensions for the silent killers of the Dark Ages. There is only the next job, the next narrow escape, and the inevitable moment when your luck finally runs out. When you look at the life expectancy of a professional killer in this era, you are not looking at years. You are looking at months, perhaps weeks. To choose this path is to sign a contract with your own mortality, and the ink is always red. The reality is that the very nature of your work is a statistical nightmare. Every time you climb a crumbling stone wall, every time you slip a blade between the ribs of a man surrounded by armed guards, and every time you consume a meal you did not cook yourself, you are rolling the dice. And in the 14th century, the dice are almost always loaded against you. consider the physical toll first. You are not a character in a ballad. You are a human being made of meat and brittle bone. In your line of work, a minor injury is often a death sentence. You do not have access to modern antibiotics or sterile bandages. If you trip while leaping from a rooftop and snap your ankle, you cannot simply go to a healer and wait for a cast to set. A broken leg in the middle of a city where your face is on every hue and cry notice means you are a dead man walking. You will crawl into a cellar. The bone will pierce the skin. The dampness of the underground will invite the rot, and you will die screaming in the dark, forgotten by the very people who paid you to be there. Even if you avoid the big breaks, the small things will get you. Every scrape from a rusty gate, every bite from a flea-ridden tavern blanket, and every nick from a poison needle you handled poorly is a gateway for infection. You spend your nights in the rain and your days in the shadows. Your immune system is constantly battered by malnutrition, lack of sleep, and the sheer, crushing weight of adrenaline. You see it in the mirror, or rather, in the reflection of a stagnant puddle. Your eyes are sunken, your skin has a grayish tint, and your hands have developed a tremor that no amount of ale can settle. You are aging 3 years for every one that passes on the calendar. Then there is the matter of your employers. This is perhaps the most brutal part of your short life expectancy. In the world of medieval politics, a living assassin is a liability. Once the deed is done, once the rival duke is dead or the troublesome bishop has been silenced, you are no longer a tool. You are a witness. You are the only person who can tie the great lord to a mortal sin and a capital crime. Do you truly believe he wants to see you again? Do you think he is waiting with a pouch of gold and a pat on the back? The moment you finish your task, the hunt for you doubles in intensity. The guards of the victim want your head for justice, and the men who hired you want your head to ensure your silence. It is a common practice for a patron to hire a second assassin to kill the first, or to simply tip off the local constabulary to your location once the job is complete. By handing you over to the hangman, the noble looks like a champion of the law while simultaneously burying the evidence of his own treachery. You are a loose thread in a tapestry of lies, and the weaver always carries a pair of shears. And what of the missions themselves? We often imagine the surgical strike, the silent infiltration. But many medieval assassinations were more akin to suicide missions. Think of the Fedayeen, the legendary killers of the mountains. Their goal was often not escape, but the public execution of their target to send a message. They knew that once the dagger struck home, they would be torn apart by the target's entourage within seconds. To be an assassin in that context was to accept that your life was the price of the kill. You were a living weapon meant to be shattered upon impact. Even if you are not part of such a radical sect, the sheer density of security around high-value targets makes escape a mathematical improbability. You might get in, but the alarm will be raised, the gates will be barred, and you will find yourself trapped in a stone cage with 50 angry men carrying halberds. The psychological weight also shears years off your life. Imagine never knowing a full night of restful sleep. Every creak of a floorboard is a transition from dream to a state of lethal readiness. Every stranger who looks at you for a second too long is a potential hunter. This constant state of hypervigilance triggers a permanent flood of cortisol and adrenaline in your system. It ruins your heart, it destroys your digestion, and it fractures your mind. You begin to see assassins in every shadow, even when there are none. Paranoia is your only friend, but she is a friend who keeps you from ever finding peace. You cannot have a family. You cannot have a home. You are a ghost while you are still breathing, and ghosts do not live long lives. If you are caught, and the odds say you will be, the end is not quick. The medieval mind was creatively cruel when it came to those who struck from the dark. Because you have violated the social order and the laws of God, your execution will be designed to be as long and as public as possible. They will not simply hang you. They will break you on the wheel, or draw and quarter you, or perhaps boil you in oil if the crime was particularly heinous. They want to ensure that every second of your remaining life is an agony that serves as a warning to anyone else who might think of picking up a blade for hire. You will die in the bright sun of the town square, surrounded by a cheering crowd that sees you not as a man, but as a monster. And when it is finally over, there is no monument. There is no line in the chronicles of history that records your name. You will be buried in a shallow grave, likely in unconsecrated ground where the dogs can get to you. Your life, which you spent so carefully honing into a lethal edge, will have left no mark on the world other than a single dead body and a few more coins in the pocket of a man who has already forgotten your face. You look down at your hands again. They are scarred, calloused, and cold. You realize that you are not the hero of this story. You are not even a villain of note. You are a disposable resource in a world that has an infinite supply of desperate people. The short and brutal life expectancy of your profession is not a bug in the system. It is the system itself. The world of the medieval assassin is a meat grinder, and you are simply the next thing to be fed into the blades. As you prepare to move again, leaving the safety of the hayloft for the uncertainty of the street, you feel the weight of every day you have managed to survive. You are an anomaly. You are a man living on borrowed time, and the interest rates are astronomical. You walk out into the cold air, knowing that the average career in this business ends with a sudden stop and a long drop, and you wonder, with a hollow feeling in your chest, if today is the day the debt finally comes due. You are not a master of your fate. You are a man walking toward a shallow grave, hoping only that the ground is soft enough to take you in when the world is done breaking you.